the Radio Today podcast with Jen Sederhelm.
Hi, and well, what a week with 3 surveys, including today's GfK Radio 360 Metro Survey 2. Just before I get to that, I will quickly cover the other 2 extra insight surveys of Karratha in WA and Griffith in New South Wales. Both were totally dominated by SCA stations, with the ABC local stations floundering. In Griffith, Hit 99.7 was down slightly, but well ahead of 963 Triple M. In Karratha, Hit WA and the new in 2025 breakfast show of Pete and Kimber with Ben Cousins blitzed the field with an extraordinary 51.9% audience share. Breakfast was up 16.2 to 52.6%. Now let's move on to Metro Survey 2, where Adelaide and Brisbane had new leaders and Perth's Nova 93.7 moved even further ahead of the pack. Starting in Melbourne though, where all eyes were on the KIIS network's Kyle and Jackie O. Yesterday, Kyle Sandilands stated on air that he is willing to pull the pin in the city if the attempts to bed in that market affect Sydney. That seemed a prescient comment today as, after a couple of big promos tailored to Melbourne, the duo went up by 0.7 to a 5.8 audience share, but the cost was a 1-point loss to 12.3 in Sydney and a cumulative audience of near 100,000. The losses outweighed the gains. Number 1 station, as usual, is 3AW, but they took a real hit, down 2.7 to 14.1, with something I'm starting to find is a trend that when 3AW surges, 9's Sydney station 2GB drops, and vice versa. Number 1 in breakfast is, of course, Ross and Russ on 3AW, who also dropped. Number 1 FM is the Christian O'Connell show, as they were last time. The breakfast show with the biggest cumulative audience, though, in Australia is Jason Lauren on Nova 100. The new breakfast shows for the ABC and for Triple M both saw drops. Sydney now, and as mentioned, contrary to 3AW, 2GB had a great survey and were number 1 overall and for Ben Fordham on breakfast. Mark Levy, Ray Hadley's replacement on mornings, had a particularly memorable survey, up 2.0 to a 15.5 audience. Gold 101.7 in that time slot was definitely affected by the move of Ugly Phil to 2GB and 9 Entertainment. Number 1 FM was still Kyle and Jackie O. Despite losing Natasha Belling from the brand new Triple M breakfast show, it was still steady this survey with a healthy increase in people checking the station out. Not so for Today FM's Jimmy and Nath with Emma Chow, yet. Bogart Torelli on Smooth 95.3 was second most improved behind Ben Fordham. Smooth Sydney was also the most listened to station in the country. In Brisbane, 104.5 Triple M took over as number 1 station from B105, gaining as much as the other lost. On breakfast 2, the new Nova 106.9 breakfast show of Ash Lutzi and Nikki Osborne also took pole position from B105. So too, Triple M's Marto, Margot and Dan pulled up equal to B105's Stab, Abby and Matt. KIIS 97.3 also had a great survey, as did 4BC, up in every day part and weekends. Adelaide 2 saw a changing of the guard as Mix 102.3 and Nova 91.9 both overtook Triple M. And while Triple M's Roo, Ditz and Loz won their 20th survey in a row, Nova's Jodie and Hazy are just 0.4 behind, with them, Hayley and Max, and Bernie and Emma G at SAFM all actually having a bigger cumulative audience, showing that the region is twiddling the dial. Mix really won this survey off the back of weekends and Michelle Murphy, who hosts 9 till 3 workdays. Finally, and I'm saving the best for last, as I think Nath, Nat and Sean on Nova 93.7 could call themselves the most successful radio show in Australia at the moment, let's look at Perth. Top station, Nova 93.7. ARN's 96 FM also had a sensational survey, up to 15.2 behind Nova's 17% audience share. Claresy and Lisa on 96 FM Breakfast, a gold station, were up 0.7 to 13.3 in second. But Nath, Nat and Sean were up 1.9 to a 21.7 audience share. Only Ross and Russ in Melbourne of late have been getting over 20%. Not only that, but the Nova team had one of the biggest cumulative audience gains, up to 433,000, and that puts their listenership in this survey ahead of Jonesy and Amanda at Sydney's Gold 101.7 and of Triple M Sydney and Melbourne. Great stuff and worth the extra attention. I think I've covered most of the cumulative audience news of note. I will add that lots of people were additionally checking out 3MP in Melbourne, and where local ABC stations were struggling, with every capital city ABC breakfast show down except Perth's Mark Gibson, ABC News radio listening was up, and significantly so in Sydney and Melbourne. Finally, DAB Plus results. The news that Thy, Cada's morning announcer, was an AI voice clone broke after the Survey 2 measurement period had concluded. Nonetheless, I was particularly interested to see how the station was faring. It was the second best result it has ever seen in Sydney, with 14,000 additional listeners tuning in, largely aged 18 to 24, exactly who ARN and Cada are targeting. Thy's listenership was down by exactly the amount the overall audience increased, but Kay Sarah, Cada's only real announcer currently after the departure of Sophie Nathan from Breakfast, increased her cum audience by 30k to 71,000. This may still be small change compared to Conchetta and Luca's 561,000 on Triple J Sydney Breakfast, but if Cada's audience cracks 200k next survey, which it might with the additional media scrutiny, those that have an issue with Thy are likely not the ones listening to its music. In Melbourne, alongside Gold 104.3 being one of the few stations there to attract listeners this survey, ARN's associated DAB Plus station Gold 80s had the largest listenership in the city, with SCA's Dance Hits, Coles Radio and Smooth Relax also seeing gains. Smooth was the top DAB Plus station in Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth. Perth loves their two Nova Entertainment stations, with their Smooth being way out ahead of the pack. Adelaide's Smooth has just 46,000 cum audience, with that city seemingly not fully on board with embracing DAB Plus just yet. That's a brief wrap of GfK Radio 360 Survey 2. The next Radio Today Tonight podcast is out next Thursday, May 8. That's the same day as the ARN AGM. And with 70 additional behind-the-scenes job losses to the company yesterday, I'll be joined by Steve Ahern to unpack Survey 2 further, as well as what the next 12 months look like for ARN. I hope you can join me then.
Radio Today with Jen Sederhelm. Find more at radiotoday.com.au.